Dear professors, doctors, students, friends, and colleagues, it's a pleasure to open this important homage. Professor Joanilio was my PhD supervisor, and it is an honor to be here. I had my first publication with him, and since then, I have been working on numerous papers. I will pass the speech to Professor Roberto Ellery to open with the department.
Uh, Good evening. On behalf of the Department of Economics and University of Brasilia, I would like to talk about dear Professor Joanilio Teixeira. The department has been one of the best departments of economics in Brazil for many years, at undergraduate and graduate level. We have leadership in so many areas of research in the field of economics. And if this is true, it's thanks to a bunch of professors, a group of professors in the 70s who came to Brasilia. And Brazil in the 70s was a very new city. It's like an advantage to come to Brasilia to create this department of economics. And among them, Professor Joanilio Teixeira. He is one of our founding fathers, let me say that. And we very thankful to Professor Joanilio. He has a number of students that now are professionals in academia, market, the government. Some of them the highest, the top of the market in Brazil, and also abroad. Professor Joanilio, it's an honor to be your colleague. It's an honor to meet you, as for so many years I met you early in the morning in our department, and to talk about economics, and to talk about the university, and to talk about Brazil. And so many talks, so many lessons you gave me. I had the honor to have a paper with Professor Joanilio and Adolfo, a friend of mine and a student of Professor Joanilio. It's a big honor. It's in my history. And in this department, and I'm talking as the head of the department, is very, very proud to have you not only as one of our professors, but in the very beginning of our history, one of our fathers. Thank you, Professor. And I'm pretty sure everyone will have the opportunity to enjoy and to learn in this series of seminars. Thank you a lot.
Thank you, Professor Roberto Ellery. The program of the event today, we have two lectures. Professor Mauro Baranzini and Professor Amalia Mirante will present the open lecture named Joanilio Rodolpho Teixeira, the founder and senior scholar of the Anglo-Italian Brazilian School of Post-Keynesian Cambridge Economics. Unfortunately, for personal reasons, they could not attend in person. So they send a video with their presentations. Let me take this opportunity to present a brief introduction about both professors. Professor Baranzini is an emeritus professor at Università della Sapienza Italiana and obtained his PhD in Fribourg. He was awarded a Floating European Fellowship of the Queen's College, Oxford. He was subsequently awarded a Senior Research Fellowship of the Swiss National Science Foundation for research to be undertaken internally in Oxford, Cambridge, and Harvard. In Oxford, he wrote a DPhil thesis under supervision of David Sostik, John Fleming, and Sir James Mirrlees. The last one is a Nobel Prize winner in 1996. From 1975 to 1984, he was lecturer and director of economic studies at the Queen's College, Oxford. He has also contributed widely to Cambridge theory of income, wealth distribution, and accumulation by incorporating into the post-Keynesian theory the well-known macroeconomic life cycle theory of Franco Modigliani. His papers have come out in Oxford Economic Papers, Economic Journal, Calculus, and many others scholarly periodicals. Professor Amalia Mirante is a lecturer in economics at the University of Lugano, Switzerland, and the University of Applied Science and Arts, Southern Switzerland. She has published several papers in economic theory and co-authored two-volume books with Professor Mauro Baranzini. The first, as a compendium in Italian economics at Oxford, Contribution to the Evolution of Economic Thinking, Palgrave Macmillan, 2016. And secondly, Luigi Pasinetti, an intellectual biography, leading scholars and the system builders of the Cambridge School of Economics, Palgrave Macmillan, 2018. I will let Professor George Thompson, Professor João Faria to speak about Professor Joanilio, and then I will play the lecture.
Thank you. Thank you, João. I'm really truly honored to be part of the committee that organized this event together with my friends, João Ricardo Faria, professor of economics at Florida Atlantic University, and João Gabriel de Araújo Oliveira, professor at IBMEC, and also postdoctoral fellow at the University of Brasilia. I will be brief because I think that there are a lot of ground to cover, but I would like to say that Joanilio has always been a friend and a mentor and occasional co-author, and I really appreciate everything that he's done for all his students and colleagues, and for me in particular, right? So we've been partners in many endeavors, and I really think that Joanilio played a key role in developing and disseminating Cambridge-style economics in Brazil and beyond. So the contribution beyond borders, so to speak. So it's really the right time to do this stock taking of Joanilio's contributions to economics. And here you're going to see, Joanilio, many of your former students and current colleagues participating in this event today and tomorrow. So looking forward for the discussions. And so with that, I'll give the floor to João Ricardo Faria. Thank you.
Thank you, George. It's a pleasure to be part of this event. Joanilio is a father figure for many of us. Just to have a brief account of my experience with Joanilio is the following. In the 80s, when I was an undergraduate and a graduate student, master's student at UNB, Joanilio was the only professor that was doing research, uninterested in doing research. This is the this is the first thing. The second is the amazing capacity, actually, his willingness to recruit and work with undergraduate students. It is still a taboo in many universities, and Joanilio was doing that in the 1980s, right? Just for you to have an idea of his knack, of his skill in identifying future promising talents. He wrote, I think, the first paper, actually, I think the first international publication of George Thompson was with, I think, was with Joanilio when George Thompson was still an undergraduate student. Can you believe that? So this shows only the wonderful work that Joanilio has done over these past decades at UNB. All right, I want just to stress two great lessons that I learned with Joanilio, and these lessons actually helped me a lot in my academic career. The first, and these two lessons is what I call the Teixeira's lessons, right? The first one is the following. He said, he used to say, a good paper is a published paper. This is like, blows the mind of many Brazilian students and practitioners, because you see, in Brazil, everybody thinks that they are like econometric authors, but they never have anything to show up as authorship, as a paper published. And Joanilio was very clear about that. A good paper is a published paper, period. And the second lesson of Joanilio, very important as well, and I hope the young people that listen to us pay attention to that. Joanilio said to me the following: Joca, if you want to have a successful academic career, you have to publish at least one paper per year. Second, better to publish in an international journal. If you follow these two Joanilio's rules, I guarantee that you are going to be extremely successful in academia. So I thank Joanilio for mentoring me, for giving me the opportunity to work with him. We published a paper together, which is, the joke is like, the paper was rejected at the SBE meeting and was published in Manchester School. Fantastic. That's what I want. Ours to be rejected in a Brazilian meeting to be published in a great international journal. I appreciate all your support, Joanilio, and I am pleased and honored to be part of this workshop. Thank you very much. Your microphone is turned off.
Sorry. Thank you very much. This remembered me that we had a paper rejected by the workshop in the Brazilian Canadian Association, and the same paper was accepted to Metroeconomica, which is really strange. So I will be playing the Professor Baranzini and the Professor Amalia Mirante video. Please let me know if you hear.
Good evening to everybody. These are Mauro Baranzini and Amalia Mirante speaking. It is the laudatio of Joanilio Rodolpho Teixeira, who is considered, in Europe at least, and everywhere else, the founder and senior scholar of the Anglo-Italian Brazilian School of Post-Keynesian Cambridge Economics. Anglo-Italian because it started in Cambridge, UK, then it developed quite strongly in Italy and also in North America, and in this case in Brazil, in Latin America, and post-Keynesian Cambridge economics because there are post-Keynesian economics also in other places of the world. The index of our presentation, which is going to last about 40 minutes, 50 minutes, includes the most important works of Joanilio Rodolpho Teixeira and his contribution to post-Keynesian income distribution and growth theory, which concerns 10 points which we shall consider afterwards one after the other, starting from the introduction of a differentiated interest rate down to the introduction of money and of financial constraints, the introduction of the public sector, the introduction of the micro foundations of the model, and then also the introduction of the issue of international trade, which is fairly important in Joanilio's work, and also the extension of the model towards an Islamic macro model of distribution with the conclusions at the end. This is a photo which we took back in 1998 when Joanilio Rodolpho was visiting Switzerland, Lugano in particular. On the left-hand side, you see the chairman of the Faculty of Economics of Lugano, and then at his right, Joanilio Teixeira, then myself, and finally, Professor Luigi Pasinetti, who was for a long time the most senior member of the Cambridge School of Economics, and who died at the end of January this year at the age of 93 nearly. Joanilio has published about 130 papers during his 50 years of work as author, co-author in the most influential scientific reviews on Keynesian Cambridge economics, and there are various of them. He has organized at least 25 important international colloquia. He has been tutor, supervisor, and sponsor of a large number of young and promising scholars, has kept in touch and met with numerous prominent economists, various Nobel Prizes among them. He has craved for the most recent and worldwide contribution in his field of research that has led to big leaps forward in our science, and his long life work has led to an impressive cross-fertilization, as we call it, of new ideas, which has meant new boundaries of economic science. Here you find a list of the 10 possibly most important scholars and pupils of Joanilio. I like to mention Jorge Thompson Araujo, who took a PhD in Cambridge back in 2000, at the end of the 1990s. I myself was an external examiner. Then I would mention João Gabriel Araujo Oliveira at the University of Brasilia, who has organized most of this meeting here. Then Ricardo Silva Azevedo Araujo, Leopoldo Costa, João Ricardo Faria, I excuse myself for the pronunciation, which is probably not perfect, and then Flavio de Oliveira Gonçalves, Carla Grasso, Luis de Mello, Adolfo Sarcida, and Sarkis, who is ambassador and has been ministry for Brazilian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Quite an important job, I must say. Now, other students were supervised by Teixeira, but not especially by him, but were part of his group. Adriana Moreira Amado, Jorge Arbache, he is vice president of the Development Bank of Latin America and Caribbean. Mauro Bojanowski, who is well known through the world, he took a PhD at Cambridge and now he teaches at the University of Brasilia. Francisco Galvão Carneiro, André Molich, André Rossi Oliveira, and Emerson Silva. They are all important economists nowadays in Brazil and in Latin America in general. And this is a a slide taken in May 2000 when Joanilio did organize the third International Symposium on Structural Change in Brasilia itself, at the University of Brasilia. And you see here is Joanilio, and here is myself and few other important economists. It's a pity that I didn't have more photos to give you and to show you. Now let's come to the 10 research lines which have characterized part, not all, but part of Teixeira contribution to post-Keynesian income distribution and growth theories. They are based on the 10 research lines which Amalia, Mirante, and myself set out and described in the volume on Luigi Pasinetti, which was published in 2018. And I must say that Luigi was never happy with this volume here because he wanted us to make amendments, corrections, and so on. And then at a certain moment, we decided to go ahead with the publication. Jeff Arcus was behind it. And Luigi was not happy. And then we told him that if we hadn't decided to publish it, probably it would still be an unpublished volume. In this volume, we find 10 research lines important of Pasinetti's contribution. The first one, which is based on the Keynes-Kaldor-Pasinetti theorem, concerned a differentiated interest rate on wealth and on accumulated savings. Second, on money and financial constraints. Third, the public sector, and here Joanilio's work has been important. Fourth, other socioeconomic classes and class struggle, which is important, especially in developing countries. Fifth, the micro foundations. And then there are other 5 topics: the analysis of the long-term distribution of wealth and income shares in the socioeconomic classes. 7, the overlapping generation model, cum intergenerational transmission of wealth. Then other aspects, in particular the applicability of the Mead-Samuelson and Modigliani dual theorem. You see that those who formulated the anti-Pasinetti theorem, Mead, Samuelson, and Modigliani, all got the Nobel Prize, but on the Cambridge side, Kaldor, John Robinson, and Luigi Pasinetti did not get the Nobel Prize. And 9, the extension of the model towards an Islamic macro model of distribution. And finally, the introduction of issue of international trade, which is important for the third world. What shall we discuss? We shall discuss briefly the main issues at stake, with particular reference to Teixeira contribution along these research lines. We must say that Teixeira, Joanilio, is quoted 61 times in the scientific biography of Luigi Pasinetti, the last of the system builders of post-Keynesian theory, Luigi himself, and that Teixeira is quoted in chapter 6, which is on income distribution, and on the Cambridge theorem is quoted 31 times. So he is one of the giants of this line of research and research program in general. Now let's come to the argument of a different interest rate or rate of return on capital for the capitalists on one side and for the workers on the other side. All started in 1962 when Pasinetti wrote in his famous paper published in the Review of Economic Studies, a paper which was strongly opposed by Frank Hahn. We've written a paper on that, Amalia, Mirante, and myself. Hahn did everything he could in order to stop the paper appearing, because that was against the neoclassical model, of which he was an important representative. And Luigi said that in order to say anything about the share and rate of profits, one needs first a theory of rate of interest. In the long run equilibrium model, Luigi said, the obvious hypothesis to make is that of a rate of interest equal to the rate of profit. That about 61 years ago. And the term differentiated interest rate was first formulated by Balestre and Baranzini. And I like to recall that in Trinity term 1975, while I was tutored by James Merlis, who got the Nobel Prize in 1996, James Merlis was puzzled and suggested the term interest rate instead, or different interest rate instead of differentiated interest rate. Now, on this slide here, you see how many papers have been published in this field here. I would say about 200 on the whole. But here we find a number of papers by Teixeira, 1999 and 2009, Teixeira and Araujo, 3 papers, Teixeira, Sugahara, and Baranzini, 2 papers, and many other papers indeed by the School of Economics of Latin America. Other scholars like Samerson and Modigliani and so on also wrote many papers on this problem here. And the introduction of the differentiated interest rate was done on this basis here. He said that a rate of interest lower than the profit rate has the same effect of a higher propensity to save of a capitalist. And this result implies that the application of the dual theorem of Mead, Samerson, and Modigliani is even more remote than ever. And so the Cambridge equation retains most of its strength. The implication on the assumption of a differentiated interest or return for accumulated savings are far-reaching. First, because it affects the distribution of income among classes. It affects the overall saving ratio, and also, and this is very important, the pattern of wealth accumulation and distribution. But in general, we may say that this analysis here led to the result that the Cambridge equation is probably stronger than originally thought. A second step, second field of research, I call it research line, is the introduction of money and of the financial constraints. And since the early 1970s, numerous analyses have focused on the role of the monetary and financial variables in the post-Keynesian Cambridge distribution and accumulation model. These works were first a response to the belief that the Cambridge post-Keynesian model does not incorporate model. That was what many neoclassical or marginal economists were saying at that moment, including Frank Hahn. And the second aim of the research was motivated by the desire to assess the neutrality or non-neutrality of money in the Cambridge model of distribution. And thirdly, it was aimed at assessing whether the equilibrium rate of interest would maintain the same characteristic as in non-monetary model. And here I come to a number of papers who have considered this problem. I quote Duck and Amadeo in 1993 in a volume which was dedicated to Luigi Pasinetti when he turned 60 back in 1993. Actually, he turned 60 in 1990, but Jeff Arcott and myself, it took us 3 more years to finish it. And also Faria has published 2 papers on that. And more recently, João Ricardo Faria in his paper, a 2-class monetary growth model, published in the important review Structural Change and Economic Dynamics, consider the problem. And João Ricardo Faria comes to these conclusions. It extends the 2-class monetary growth model by incorporating fiscal activity along the lines of Pasinetti. And despite these extensions, the Cambridge equation is found to be one of long-run equilibria. And we were happy of reading this result, of seeing this result, because it meant that the Cambridge theorem, or the Cambridge equation of Keynes, Caldo, Pasinetti, is much stronger than one would think. And he shows, Ricardo Faria, how that fiscal policy decreases the accumulation of capital by an increase in the tax of profits. And we might also quote Amitabh Dutt and Amadeo, who in 1993 wrote a post-Keynesian theory of growth, interest, and money. As I said, in Baranzini and Harcourt, The Dynamics of the Wealth of Nations, essays in honor of Luigi Pasinetti. And the central implication of their model, of Dutt and Amadeo, is that changes in the interest rate affect the level of investment and the distribution of income and wealth between profit receivers and wage earners, and thus the level of consumption. But again, the strength of the Cambridge equation is confirmed. And then a model of growth and distribution could not include the public sector. And starting from 1970, a few years after Luigi Pasinetti published his 1962 paper, a large number of economists, and here I quote some of them, among whom Teixeira Araujo, Teixeira, Sugarra, Baranzini, Faria, Teixeira again, have considered this problem indeed. And the result, it all started with the result obtained by Fleck and Domenghino, who challenged Pasinetti, and then Teixeira and Araujo and partly Dalziel did consider a corrected version of a 2-class model with a central government which levies direct and indirect taxes. And Teixeira in 2009 writes as follows: lines of research such as international trade and foreign debt, different rates of interest and profit for public and private assets, monetary sector, Ricardian debt equivalent, debt taxation equivalence, intergenerational wealth accumulation are some of the challenges being tackled in their paper. And these contributions have tended to show that the essential features of the Cambridge result are not invalidated under a wide range of assumptions, thus corroborating the generality and robustness of the Pasinetti theorem inside. And other important models were developed later on, always on the public sector, or considering a public sector, by Palli, Commendatori, Dalziel, many other, Araujo and Teixeira, and so on. And we do not know if Luigi Pasinetti, who died unfortunately nearly a year ago, as well as Jeff Harcourt, who died 2 years ago, had the chance to follow this sub-controversy on the Cambridge equation. But this would have greatly appreciated these conclusions, one of many of the Brazilian post-Keynesian school of economics, which turned out to be important in this field. And finally, always considering the public sector, I must say that the so-called Brazilian post-Keynesian school of economics which included Teixeira, Francisco Galrao Carneiro, Sugahara, Araujo, Sarkis, Molo, Paria, Benuino, has explored other directions. First, Faria in his paper, The Pasinetti Paradox in an Intertemporal Dynamic Model, and then Faria and Raoult in another model, in another paper. They provide micro foundations for the two-class growth model of accumulation and income distribution. And the main features of the Keynes-Kaldor-Pasinetti model is that, if we consider the micro foundations, the saving ratio of the classes is exogenously given and hence independent, for instance, of the rate of interest earned on savings, both of life cycle or intergenerational nature. Little attempt is made to explain the historical importance of the intergenerational bequest of the system, and the equality in the long-run equilibrium between the rate of profit earned by the entrepreneurs and the rate of interest earned by the other classes are on the accumulated savings. And the main contributions here are those of Brito, Han and Matthew, 1971, Atkinson, Bevan, myself, Baranzini, Faria and Araujo, Teixeira, and many others of the Brazilian School of Economics, Baranzini and Mirante, Baranzini and Mari, and more insight into the determination of the distribution of income among classes and the equilibrium variables of the model, with an understanding of the reasons that might lead to historical class difference to a different accumulation of capital, both life cycle and intergenerational, and why a class may start, why and when a class may start accumulating intergenerational assets. And the analysis turns out to confirm that the optimal equilibrium interest rate does not depend on the form of the production function. This is important because it was Frank Hahn who didn't first accept this result. And this is why I tried to stop Luigi publishing the paper in the Review of Economic Studies back in 1960-61. Nor the value of the capital labor ratio. And this makes a big, of course, the neoclassical model, marginalist model, more weak than usual. And we know that the equilibrium interest rate equal here to the profits rate is greater than the rate of growth of population. One of the reasons for which you need a higher rate of interest in order to guarantee a minimum rate of growth of population. And the third point concerns the maximization of consumption per capita. It is maximized only when there is a strong desire to leave a bequest to the next generation. And I dwell now upon the long-run distribution of wealth and on income share of the social economic classes. Here, Teixeira and Goes have written a paper, Growth and Income Distribution, the Heritage Effect on the Capital Accumulation Process, in the review Structural Change and Economic Dynamics. They show how the behavioral asymmetry between workers and rentiers impacts the decision on consumption, savings, and capital stock, while I myself in 1991 put forward an alternative approach, allowing for technical progress and the introduction of behavioral differences between rentiers and workers. But the technical conceptual framework of the present approach extends Baranzini model, and I'm grateful to Teixeira for his work and what he has written about on it. And his model emphasizes how agents incorporate their assets into their constraints. The second point is to focus on the long-term properties of the model, with particular reference to the functional distribution of income and to the share of income by classes. Numerous papers have been considered, this issue. Again, Gross and Teixeira and in their paper, and they conclude that we show how the behavioral asymmetry between workers and rentiers allow for the technical progress and introduction of behavioral difference between rentier and workers, not only from a point of view of initial endowment, but also from their long-term objective equilibrium. And we come to the last part of this topic of long-run distribution of wealth and income distribution, and again we find a number of papers by the Latin American economists, Teixeira in particular, Sugahara, Benuino, under some realistic assumption on the transmission of wealth, total savings of the economy will expand, they maintain, contrarily to what one might presume. And Teixeira, Sugahara, and Baranzini also conclude that when the state increases its expenditure beyond taxation, i.e. for a budget deficit financed by public debt, it should take into account that debt financing might involve sophisticated instruments. And we come now to another topic which is important within the Cambridge theorem of Pasinetti and its literature, and that's to say the introduction of the issue of international trade. I start quoting Teixeira and Araujo, who extend the pure labor version of Pasinetti model of structural change and economic dynamics to consider international economic relations. Teixeira and Oliveira do also write the paper a note reconsidering a post-Keynesian model of present distribution in a globalization context, and they conclude, we show that certain kinds of taxation and government expenditure may not affect the essential nature of the Cambridge equation. And this again is a very important result indeed. I quote here because we found, Amalia, Mirante, and myself, a growing literature taking into account the Islamic basic data and the Islamic assumptions to explain the macro model of distribution of the Cambridge School. It has been extended to the Islamic economic literature. At least 10 papers have been published, probably more. Hamad in 1982 shows that in any Islamic model, the equilibrium profit rate depends exclusively on the propensity to save of the capitalist class, and this is in line with Luigi Pasinetti Cambridge theorem, but also on the Zaha rate. What is the Zaha rate? The Zaha rate is a compulsory tax for Muslim. It is a contribution paid once a year on savings of 2.5%. It's a tax. And secondly, according to Al-Ahyari, for reasonable value of parameters, the rate of return on capital in the Islamic model is greater than that of Caldo-Pasinetti, of the Caldo-Pasinetti model. And thirdly, as already anticipated, the rate of growth of an Islamic model normally is higher than that of the Caldo-Pasinetti model. So rate of growth in the case of an Islamic model must be stronger in order for the system to maintain its equilibrium. I come now to the conclusions concerning this, the life work of Joanilio Rodolpho Teixeira and his pupils, colleagues, and scholars. The first is that over more than 15 years, the Keynes-Caldo-Pasinetti post-Keynesian research program has been developed and refined far and wide by Joanilio Teixeira and his distinguished pupils. Of the 200 or 300 post-Keynesian economists who have published quite a lot of papers in the last 60 years, since Luigi Pasinetti wrote his paper in 1962, I must say that Joanilio Teixeira is one of the most prolific indeed. Not only prolific himself, but prolific in setting a task for his pupils, for his scholars, for his PhD students, and in taking them hand in hand along this research line or this research program. Teixeira's aim has been to inquire into the distribution of income and wealth, and with the determination of the rate of profits in a steady state growth model compatible with full employment growth. And the distribution of income and wealth, as you might know, is much more important in the developing world than it is in the developed world. Such a research program enlightens the economic behavior of pure entrepreneurs. Again, as for Caldo, for Keynes, for John Robinson, for Luigi Pasinetti, for Jeff Harcourt, the pure entrepreneurs are the most important class because they are the engine of growth. The pure entrepreneur class are important for the determination of the relevant economic variables of the model. The other class, that of the workers or the rentier, can save, of course, can consume, of course. Their consumption is important indeed, but they are not able to influence the long-term equilibrium values of the model. And I must say that in the case of the work of Joanilio Teixeira, the historical, demographic, institutional, as well microeconomic aspects of these models here have come under scrutiny, and a number of relevant questions seems to have received adequate answers up to now. But the program is going on, and every year there are at least 10 or 15 papers on the Caldo-Pasinetti model which are published one after the other. 200 much distinguished scholars have contributed to this research program. Probably there are 300 now. A good dozen of them were made up by the Brazilian School of Cambridge Economics, probably more than 12. I would say probably 20. Their contribution has been fundamental for most research lines which have examined above. Summing up, the Brazilian School of Economics, led by Joanilio Rodolpho Teixeira, represents an important contribution to the evolution of economic thought and to the cross-fertilization of ideas of our scientific work, which goes round, which continues day after day. And therefore I conclude, and thank you for listening to us, even if my English in the last few years has gone down a bit. Thank you, Joanilio, for all you've done for us and for our profession and science. What you did your best to honor our masters like Keynes, Kahn, Barrett Robinson, Zaffa, Harcourt, Pasinetti, and many others. I was reading this morning the letter of John Craven, who has been an important professor at the University of Kent, and then he has been president of a British university, who was saying that Joanilio had the capacity of becoming an important professor of economics and an important author in his particular field. Now, Joanilio, we wish you many, many happy returns. Maybe you have another 2 decades, you can reach 100, why not? During which you surely will write many more papers indeed, and especially contribute to the growth of a scientific esteem and the scientific work of your scholars, of your pupils and your PhD students. Thank you so much. Everybody, have a good evening and a good continuation of these meetings. I would also like to thank Amalia Mirante for all what she's done in our group in the last years for the progress of economic science. Thank you so much. Have a good night from here in Switzerland.
So I would like to thank Professor Mauro Baranzini and Professor Amalia Mirante for this brilliant presentation. Now I will present Professor Joanilio Teixeira. He is an emeritus professor at the emeritus professor Joanilio joined the Department of Economics at the University of Brasilia in 1977, and since then he was one of the responsible for the graduate program at the department, supervising more than 15 PhD and MSc theses, and publishing more than 130 works. Besides, he has been a postdoctoral and visiting professor researcher at Cambridge, Harvard, Oxford, London School of Economics, Stanford, California, Berkeley, CEPREMAP, IED, Sorbonne, Lugano, Milan, ESG, Lisbon, and other prestigious universities. He is a fellow of the World Academy of Art and Science, a guardian of Milton Santos' work, and a member of the prestigious Club of Rome. Nowadays, he is a senior research fellow at the UNB. In this vein, it is an honor for his former and current students to create this homage for him, supported by the Department of Economics at the University of Brasilia and student representation. Professor Joanilio, it's a pleasure to speak here on behalf of all the audience, and please, the floor is yours.
Good evening, my friends, colleagues. Well, I'm very happy with this opportunity. People here have been too generous, and it will be very difficult to advance new ideas, to make further comments, because you are great persons, and I enjoy very much to come to this place and to see you again. Well, I'll try to resume my vision with very few points. First, I was born in Minas State, and eventually I did have a lucky opportunity to attend a secondary school, Granbury Institute, in which I did have my secondary studies. That was the opportunity in which I did read Romans, Italians, and many other people, great writers from all around the world. And when I was 16 or 17 years old, I became a bit worried because I did like very much mathematics, chess, literature, history, etc. What was my difficulty? To find a profession, what to do when you have some facilities in so many areas. Fortunately, my parents were also very nice, kind, and stimulated me very much to follow a kind of academic career. And I discovered that something that was calling too much my attention was history of economic thought. And then I thought about something that I consider very important. Well, I did like very much chess. Actually, I even thought about the possibility to play chess professionally. Well, what a silly idea. In a country like Brazil, nobody can learn to play chess and play well and think that he can survive with the kind of wage that he would receive. As I said, mathematics was also a fascination to me, a fascination. And eventually, I discovered that since I did have some kind of lefty view about the history, about many things, better to study economics. And I decided to study economics, Federal University of Juiz de Fora. It was not a good place to study. Actually, the course was not very strong. Wasn't very strong. And in the beginning, I became very disappointed with what I would do professionally. Well, I entered at university, and I discovered that mathematics was very important in the study of economics, especially heterodox economics, but not just heterodox economics. It was something that was coming, was occurring rapidly, and the more extremely stimulant. So I decided to pay attention, not only in mathematics, but also in history of economic thought, read the great economists especially of the last century. And I discovered that, well, interesting, it is possible to use mathematics sufficiently and to advance some ideas properly. But if I could concentrate only in that was teaching at university, it would be very poor. It would be a very stimulating profession. So I discovered that, no, it would be very nice to think about economics, not just about the BSc in economics, but to think about the possibility to continue towards a master degree or something like this. Again, I decided to buy a number of books, and I was very happy because I didn't have time to consider myself almost a kind of specialist in mathematics, economics, and a bit in the history of economic thought originally, and mainly the works of Kaletsky, John Robinson, Passinetti, people like this. Now comes something that I consider very interesting. At that time, in Brazil, there were just two faculties, or just these institutions actually teaching in a kind of postgraduate program, FGV, Rio de Janeiro, and USP. And I decided to prepare myself to go to Rio de Janeiro or to São Paulo in order to advance my program of studies. Something fascinating did happen with me. Why I did choose not Rio de Janeiro, FGV, but São Paulo, because the course in São Paulo was more heterodox. Although I was a friend of Baranzini and people like this, because we did play chess together, I think that my temperament, my motivation, philosophically, was involved with some kind of heterodox vision, heterodox view. In this way, I moved to São Paulo in 1967. And I was really surprised because when I arrived in São Paulo, I discovered that my English was very poor, very bad. And most of the teachers were foreigners and giving seminars in English. And my English was very poor in order to do this, to have a nice performance. Then I decided to concentrate myself for 6 months, or something like this, or 4 or 5 months, in English. And then, only in the second semester, I would dedicate myself to the study of advanced economics. But I must say that I was not really very happy with my performance, and also the academic performance at that level in Brazil. Fortunately, again, what happens? At the point that I was in São Paulo, it was a tendency for us to move to different places, like Campinas, São José dos Campos, and I discovered that in São José dos Campos, there was a master degree in mathematics, actually quantitative methods. And I discovered that, they were in need of a young lecturer that could teach mathematical economics to the engineering students. And I decided that I would be a candidate. So, by luck, I got the position. And then I started one of the best years of my life, or the best periods in my life, to study at ITA. And I was the first people or person coming from social science that completed the master in quantitative methods at ITA. It was in the late 60s. But then I, again, took in consideration something that I consider important. Since English was very important in my profession, it would be a good idea to go to London, to the London School of Economics, and to spend there at least 1 year in order to improve myself and to prepare for something special, for publication or something like this. Eventually, I moved to London. It was fascinating. There I did meet persons like Morishima. I attended a few lectures by John Robinson, and it became a passion for me to see all these people talking about economics in a kind of non-orthodox way. There was also one orthodox that was involved very much in me. But I prefer only to mention people with some kind of left tendency. Important point. At the London School of Economics, I discovered that John Robinson was giving seminars on Rosa Luxemburgo, on Kaletsky, on Taldor, and Pacinetti. Unfortunately, I only had scholarship, Brazilian scholarship, for a single year. So it was necessary to return to Brazil. And when I returned to Brazil, I spent 1 year doing 2 things simultaneously, teaching at the ITA and teaching also at the National Institute of Space Activities. It was marvelous, this kind of experience. And after 1 year, I moved again to London, not to England, but then not to Kent. Why not? Why not to Cambridge, Oxford, or other places? Because I did have only scholarship for 3 years, at the most, it was 3 years. And then I discovered that John Craven, he used to be a student or a researcher at MIT, Cambridge, etc. And he decided that he could very well give me some hints towards a master degree program. And then it was precisely what I did. And again, fortunately, what happens? In Kent, at Canterbury, então John Craven would be my supervisor. And I didn't have time to concentrate myself in the contribution of John Robinson, Pierre Raffa, Nicole Kaletsky, Maurice Dobby, Paul Suisse, and Luigi Pacinetti. It was something fantastic. Comes here something is very special, because John Craven, my supervisor, was not a specialist in heterodox economics. He was much more a mathematical economist, very strong, and he knew very well the Dosso model, Dosso and Solo model, and they helped very much to organize my thesis in such a way that in less than 3 years, let's put it this way, in 3 years, I completed my PhD, and then it was time to return to Brazil. So, and I returned to what place? To ITA and INPE, and to teach again and to do some research. Now comes something that was very impressive. I was in São José dos Campos, and I thought that, São José dos Campos, the school of engineer, ITA, was very strong, but was not very strong in economics. The same with INPE, Institute of Research, Instituto de Pesquisas Espaciais, Research Institute for
National Institute of Space Research.
Well, and for my lucky, what did happen? I did make a visit to Asia and to the United States. In these 2 places, I discovered that it would be better for me, for my academic life, to return to Brazil and to move from ITA and INPE. Eventually, I discovered that Brasilia would give me a good opportunity. So I came to Brasilia in 1970. 78,
77.
no, 77. And it was very nice to be in Brasilia, because in Brasilia, we did have a new program. We did not have yet a PhD program in economics. But the people were concerned about this. And I did have the opportunity to stimulate such a work, to concentrate myself in the organization of the Brazilian Economic Society, and to pay special attention to something that could direct me to do some research here at the University of Brasilia. I could consider many things associated with this kind of vision, ideas, and something like this. But something that caused my attention was the PhD program here that we started to build. In order to facilitate, to organize our program, we decided to invite a number of famous economists. Among them, John Robinson, and she came here, she spent practically 2 weeks here with us. It was something that impressed me very much, and she decided, after some conversation with me, to invite me to visit her in Cambridge. And I was very lucky, because in Cambridge, we did have marvelous economists at that time, including John Robinson. But the important point is that I started there my first postdoctoral program. Okay. I have the impression that that period was one of the best period of my academic life. But at the same time, I did have the possibility to visit many institutions in Europe. And in this way, I also visited places in the United States. And eventually, I invited to come to Brazil one fellow that was very important, former president of the Economic Society, Professor Franklin Fisher. Well, we started to talk about things, something like this. Eventually, he invited me to join him for a period in Harvard. I was surprised, because he was from the he was a professor at MIT, but he decided to have what we call this a period, a sabbatical period in Harvard. And then we did have the possibility to work together for some months. Eventually, I also did have the possibility to meet someone that was very important in my professional activities, Professor Edson Donner from MIT. We became friends, as I did say. And in 1984, I was the editor of the Brazilian Economic Society. And we invited many people to come to great scholars to come to Brasilia. And eventually, we started substantial progress with our PhD program at the University of Brasilia. And of course, most of those famous scholars also helped me to organize our PhD program. Okay? I would say that I was very lucky. For instance, I did have opportunities like a Fulbright fellowship to carry out my postdoctoral research at Stanford, Berkeley, many other places. And I thought that it would be very important to spend a period, a long period in the continent. I was very happy again. And in 1996, I was senior researcher at EAD's University de Paris, Panthéon-Sorbonne. It was a marvelous experience also. In 1998, I was invited by Professor Mauro Baranzini, to spend a period in Lugano. It was something fascinating again, because there was Fascinetti, Mauro Baranzini, and it was the opportunity of making a marvelous experience, personal experience, and friendship. I still consider, Mauro Baranzini was the head of the faculty, and Luigi Fascinetti was a senior scholar. We became friends, and I'm very proud to be considered the founder of the senior scholar of Anglo-Italian-Brazilian School of Post-Keynesian Economics. Furthermore, better to mention that I consider Fascinetti one of the greatest Cambridge heterodox of last century. He considered Mauro Baranzini the most important Fascinetti of all time. You did see his presentation here. He was very nice, very kind. And I'm trying to summarize very much what I would like to say. I must confess that in the last 3 years, I did have many problems with, in order to survive the circumstances of health problems in Brazil, but not just this. I would like to say something that I consider very important, is that, as I said before, I became a friend of Mauro Baranzini, Fascinetti, and I consider Fascinetti a fascinating person. It is a pity that the sound here was not too good, and so we did not have the opportunity to listen carefully some of his words, but it is fascinating. Let me say that in 2002, I obtained a position of senior researcher at Simplemap in Paris, and later I returned to UNB. Between 2006 and 2008, I was coordinator of the Seminar of Economics in Paris. Also, I taught economics in many other cities and important universities. In 2012, it was my formal retirement, and I received the title of Emeritus Professor from the University of Brasilia. But I'm continuing my activities now as Senior Fellow Researcher. Let me also say that my academic life was improved in terms of international contact, also due to the World Academy of Art and Science, WAAS. This institution is very important, and now coming to my attention one point that I consider very important. I mentioned very little the works of Post-Kaletsky, but I consider that one of my important contributions to the World Academy of Art and Science was to show to the colleagues that we could join together post-Keynesian and the post-Kaletsky economics in such a way that we could produce internationally something important. Let me say something that I consider important again. most of my talk so far may give you the impression that I'm trying to show myself too much. But this is not my intention. My main intention at the moment is to say something like this. Life has not been so easy. Not at all, not at all. It requires dedication, hard work, friendship, many other things that I consider very important. In the last 3 years, I must confess that I did have some problems with the COVID-19 and the severe frustrations due to the COVID-19. It is my view that a search for a sense of belonging and ways to sustain income, culture, dignity are required in every profession. This is especially true if you decide to be a teacher, a professor, or a lecturer. And I would say also something that I consider important. In order to be a dedicated authorities in this kind of professional activities that I have, it is fundamental to pay attention to human behavior, to technological impacts of environments, to pay attention to signals of problems in the technology, climate change, things like this. And I must confess that nowadays, I'm very concerned about this, about the future. In my case, I intend to work for 2 or 3 more years, but I consider that differently from most of the academic community, even here in Brasilia, I am a heterodox economist, but not just this. I consider that the future of the country is becoming very difficult. I tend to see that most of the people are concerned about the technological change, climate change, things like this, hoping that eventually things will solve. This is not my case. This is not my case. I'm not optimistic at all about the near future. I mean, the next 10 to 15 years or something like this. And I consider that the deforestation of the Brazilian Amazon biome is a tragedy. I consider that a kind of crisis and stormy capitalism is knocking our door very strongly. Not for more than this. One of the most significant concerns that I have at the moment is with artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence. Many people believe that international artificial intelligence will solve most of the problems that are coming. Well, I'm not too confident about this. Quite the contrary. I think that the AI, international artificial intelligence, has been making huge strides, surprising even to the creators. But what is the problem? The technological advances are obvious. However, it may generate a number of disadvantages, and this is occurring very fast. And I don't know what will occur in the next couple of decades. So I intend to consider just 2 points to finish this fast conversation. I consider, no, it is essential to consider potential impacts to mitigate effects of the AI. Also, effects of changes in the atmosphere. I think that we have many challenges, hopes, illusions, and the difficulties. I think that we need to be much more worried about the creation and the sustainability of scholarships. It's unfair to expect that young people could stop doing any MSc or PhD because now it does not pay too much to attend this kind of program in comparison with the 10, 15 years ago. So my point is this: we need to very concern about the future of the young people. I have the impression that it's becoming quite natural for many people, young persons, to consider that, well, why to do a MSc or a PhD? The age, the initial age is too low. Well, it's time to reconsider the situation, to reconsider seriously. And I would like to say again that timing is difficult. More than this, the Brazilian socioeconomic status of the future, the environment, is becoming almost a tragedy. And we have been condemned to what we call unequal society, unfair society, unfinished society, and almost stagnant society. If you compare Brazil with the advanced countries, we feel this, that we are losing power, we are losing space, and we don't know what to do to correct this democratically. I would say that poverty and violence are too present in our Brazilian society. It's time to change this if we still have time. Let me say something. Will you change it to another? As I said in the beginning of this conversation, when I was a teenager or something like this, I did have passions for literature, chess, mathematics, and many other things that I considered very important at that time, and still I consider important. What can I say about my life? I would say that it was not so simple, so easy. And I'd like to end this by mentioning one of my famous philosophers, Bertrand Russell. He argues something like this: this has been my life. I have found it worth living and would gladly live it again if the chance were offered me. That was Bertrand Russell. But I would add something. However, I would include a point. It would be good to make those necessary corrections that probably would go beyond my capacity. So before I finish this, let me say that, as I said in the beginning of this conversation, in the last 3 years, my English is deteriorating very fast. One of the reasons was the lack of contact with many people abroad, many institutions abroad, things like this. Well, I consider this to be very important. And I advise the students to spend, to end their PhD fast, rapidly, and try to spend a period abroad. It is very important to share ideas, Otherwise, life becomes too small, too small. Let me say that I would like to thank you all, friends, family, colleagues, students, for sharing this event with me. Tomorrow, I will talk again, and I hope to survive better than today. Here you have some of my passions, chess, another one. Here a photo involving Passinetti, Baranzini, and myself, and another colleague. Okay. Here, I like to mention especially Joan Robinson. I think that I was in love with her, and I'm still in love with her. I consider her, together with Rosa Luxemburgo, the greatest women economists of all time, of all time. In this photo, you see her with me, and there is another photo here, quite interesting. I am not a good driver, but here I decided to drive her in Brasilia, and successfully. I was surprised about this. Okay, yeah. This is one of my visits to Berlin Oriental. That's my wife, that's me, and this event, it is a homage to Rosa Luxemburgo. Okay? Here, perhaps my last one, my last photo. I don't know if you can read this. Can you read this? No. Can you read it?
Would like to me read?
Eh?
Would like to me read this
Could
picture?
Just to mention, I didn't mention this was possible, but I did publish it nearly of something like 50 books or something like this, more than 130 papers, things like this. And one of my most important paper, in my opinion, was very surprising because I was teaching in Europe, and eventually I received an invitation to produce a biography of Passinetti. And then I accepted the invitation. It took me something like 6 months to produce the final result. The life of Passinetti, including his life and also his intellectual contributions. And it was published. And I was the only non-Italian economist to receive the invitation. And I was so happy with this. And I discovered later that very few people did have the opportunity to read this work. And it is a comment by Passinetti. Could you?
Okay. Dear Joanilio, I have just received a copy of a Meazzi edited Elgar book. I should like to express you my deepest thanks for the time and the care you have put in the biography sketch you have written. It is at the same time very generous and accurate. Thought it had been embarrassing for me to read it. I cannot but admit that your place is the best biography so far written on me and my work. I should like to express you again my profound gratitude. Yours sincerely, Luigi Pazinetti.
Thank you very much. So thank you again for being here. And sorry for my poor English. It's really deteriorating. Thank you very much. Okay.
Okay. I would like to thank you, Professor Joanilio Teixeira. You entered my life in 2019 and made my life really more interesting. I have a great opportunity to work with you, and you sponsor me for my PhD in University of Brasilia, in the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul, in Leeds University Business School, University of Kent, and so on. It is a pleasure to me to be here. I'm really happy, and I'm glad to be considered one of your former students and now your co-author. I would like to thank Professor Jorge Thompson and Professor João Faria. And I would like to ask for Professor João Faria to talk a little bit about Professor Joanilio in this homage. Please, Professor João Faria, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'll be brief, but what I need to make a remark about the life history that Joanilio presented us, right? Because he had this incredible network. As he showed, he visited and he spent some time in the best departments in the world. But there is something very remarkable about that, is that he always found a niche to place his students and former students in the places where he has been, right? So it shows this his generosity towards his students, and more importantly, he was always concerned with the international success of his pupils. So this is something very remarkable, and I think that Professor Baranzini is absolutely correct in saying that he is the father of this school of thought. I would extend, not only, I would not limit Joanilio's intellectual influence towards post-Keynesianism, but as an economist, a complete economist, that's the real story. Because you see, Joanilio says that, oh, he was a left-wing guy, but during his classes, he would teach with the same passion and the same search for the truth, for any type of theory, including orthodox economics, right? And another point that is fantastic regarding Joanilio as a professor, teacher, is that he was the only guy in the world that can fill a blackboard, managing chalk, and keep his suit entirely clean. I don't know how he was able to learn his tricks, these tricks, but it was admirable to have a class of Joanilio in his suit, always elegant, always like a British-like posture, and filling all the blackboard with enormous amount of equations, explaining them as if it was very easy to understand. That was sensational. And it also contrasts very much with the traditional left-wing Brazilian economists that hate mathematics. Joanilio is the exception, and that's why he is the best of all, by far, right? So that's my my words. I could elaborate for 3 days and tell you many stories about Joanilio, but I'm pleased to have like these 5 minutes to say some of the impressive things he did for me, for George Thompson, for João Gabriel, for a number of people that are tremendously happy to have Joanilio as a teacher, professor, and overall as a friend. That's the most important.
Thank you very much, Professor João Faria. I would like to invite Professor George Thompson to talk a little bit about Professor Joanilio.
Thank you, João. So first of all, I fully subscribe to what Joca just said about Joanilio, 100% true. Well, second, I also want to say that this has been a fantastic evening. I mean, it's really a treat to have Mauro Baranzini followed by Joanilio Teixeira, right? I mean, how often do you get that kind of treat? This is really a beautiful combination. And I want to say a few things about Joanilio. So first, Joanilio, the first subject I took with Joanilio was actually national accounting, and somehow he made national accounting, which is a very dry subject, right, to be a very interesting and thought-provoking. I mean, national accounting and thought-provoking in the same sentence are usually an oxymoron, right? But somehow he made it very interesting. So he brought interesting materials from outside the sort of the standard national accounting curriculum, right? From IO tables and a lot about Leontiev, the Marxian schemes of reproduction, you name it, the whole thing. So Joanilio has this quality of transforming things that are usually pretty dry in something interesting and stimulating, right? And then not to speak of a course on political economy that he taught for the undergraduate, which was legendary, right? So that's where he actually could sort of put forward the full suite of Cambridge economics. And this is the other point I want to make, because at the time, it was in the 80s, right? You would, in Brasilia, you would always think about two main camps. You would have mainstream, or it's mostly neoclassical, and then the Marxian economists. That's it. You would have this kind of dichotomy, right? So Joanilio came with a kind of a third wave, and the third wave was bringing the Cambridge Keynesians, Skaletsky, into the picture, right? Which pretty much nobody else in Brazil, and very few people in Brazil were doing at the time. And so he introduced a whole generation of economists, well, more than one generation of economists in Brasilia to this line of thought, right? Which was, for me, it was an eye-opener and had a huge influence on my thinking and career. Of course, I mean, I ended up doing something a little bit orthogonal to Cambridge economics, but I still think that's the best thing since sliced bread in the profession. So again, Joanilio, I would like to express my appreciation for everything you have done for us and that you're still doing. Thank you.
Eu vou convidar o James.
Well,
Oh,
last but not least, let me thank you very much. Quero like the Eleni, João Gabriel, Jorge Thompson, João Ricardo Faria, and all the people that came here or attend the meeting distantly, but motivated to listen to me. I must confess that I'm very happy. And there is just one thing that I consider important to mention now to end my short speech. something that is surprising me is that nowadays it becomes very difficult to attract persons to work together jointly. Normally, people tend to prefer to use the internet, to use the other equipments. Well, I can understand this, and perhaps the future will go fast, much more fast in such direction. Well, from my standpoint, this is a kind of tendency, but somewhat, I feel that we lose the possibility to join each other together, to share ideas, and I consider this to be one of the most important things that happens, especially in the academic life. So again, thank you very much for your cooperation, for your attention, for everything that you have done to facilitate my life. I do hope to see you again many other times. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Joanilio. I would like to invite if someone virtually or in person here would like to talk a little bit about Professor Joanilio, or if don't have, I will finish the section. Okay. So thank you very much, Professor Joanilio. Thank you very much, Professor João Faria, Professor Jorge Thompson. It's a pleasure to work with such brilliant persons.